Awesome. I'm good.
You're good.
Yeah. All right, can everybody hear me? Yes. Is the lapel mic on? We're good? Spencer, we need our presentation up wherever you are. Is it up there? No, not yet? All right, I'll just start talking. I'll introduce myself. Chris Gorthy, DPR Construction. I've been with DPR for about 14 years. Been in the business for about 20. I act as a pre-construction project executive, have done a fair amount of operations elements in the field as well. On the project we're about to talk to, I acted as owner and project executive, so I got to kind of sit on both sides of the table. I went to school for architecture, so I did get sucked to the dark side of construction, so don't hold that against me. But we got to work with an incredible team on this project, and looking forward to sharing some of the results and details with you.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, I'm Matt Pacinelli, currently Managing Director at Stream Realty Partners, where we are a national third-party leasing and management firm. My involvement in this project was at my prior role at Penzance, where I oversaw leasing. Penzance, you may be familiar with, is a local developer operator. And we were fortunate to be able to work with DPR on this project. It was certainly unusual, given the cooperation between landlord and tenant.
Thank you. Name is Muir with Transwestern. I've been there roughly 11 years. Most of that focused on the tenant representation side. Was fortunate enough to call and still call DPR my client and represent them on the requirement that we will take you through here briefly.
So with that, we're gonna try to keep this informal. We're gonna walk around upstage A to keep you awake, because we know we're the last presentation before lunch. But B, we're gonna kind of bounce through probably about 25, 30 minutes of conversation, and then Kathy's going to facilitate some questions and answers for you, where we'll kind of act in a panel discussion. So hopefully us being up on stage isn't too obnoxious for you as we get into it.
Good enough. So opening up to give you a few details about the requirement, DPR's requirement. They were located previously at 2941 Fairview Park. We were looking for roughly 18 to 20,000 square feet to accommodate 80 people with workstations. A large part of their workforce is also off-site, which encompasses a total of roughly 300 people. So we needed to have adequate space for training and for those employees to get back on-site. They wanted to be more in a low-rise building. That was a big focus. They were on the 6th floor at 2941. They wanted more of a general contractor feel, not more of the corporate feel. General Dynamics was a large tenant in the old building, so they kind of wanted to relocate to a single or two-story building, and we really identified those best markets for them to be Falls Church, Tysons, and Reston, and obviously they ultimately ended up at on Sunset Hills out in Reston.
And those two pictures you see are from the Falls Church office space. Many of you may be familiar with that, the 2941 Fairview Park address.
Furthermore, on the requirements were they were looking for a long-term lease, which ultimately we ended up at a 10-year lease with a fair amount of free rent outside of the term. A large component of this, as you can see by the picture next to here, was roof access. They wanted to be able to litter the roof with solar panels as well as skylights, which we'll go in more detail about a little later in the presentation. Roof penetrations is something else we will touch on, but due to the solar panels as well as the skylights, that was something we had to navigate and work through as well with the wonderful landlord here. But another thing was we wanted to capture the energy savings from the sustainable elements that they were putting into the building. So we went with the net of electric deal on this, which was roughly, I think we said it was a $2-ish number. So they could achieve the savings from that. And Chris will touch a little more on this, but also gave them the opportunity to work on the customization of the base building areas of the property as well.
So I can touch a little bit on the location. The building is in the Sunset Hills Corporate Center, which is effectively across from the Lake Fairfax Business Center. If you can picture that area, almost directly adjacent to what will be the General Dynamics headquarters. It was originally a R&D facility, effectively an accessory building to the office building adjacent to it, which was about 150,000 square foot Class B, Class A office building currently. The interesting thing about the building that DPR ultimately occupied, which was the R&D facility there right along the Dulles Toll Road, is that effectively the market was viewing this building as effectively obsolete. the investment sales brokers were underwriting, or even in suggesting to prospective buyers to underwrite no income on the building. We had a different view. The building, the location is phenomenal. Obviously, it's the easternmost access point on the toll road closest to Tysons. It is 200 yards from the W&D Trail. It is a half a mile from the Weston Riley Metro, and it's about a 2-mile ride down Sunset Hills to Reston Town Center. The building itself, as you can see, maybe we're going a little fast here, but
That's all right,
we can
you're
try
fine.
to clip back. The building itself, sort of viewed as an obsolete 1980s flex building, 2 stories, 40,000 feet, 20,000 feet per floor. It had a 8-2 drop ceiling, rather sort of traditional build out. But our view was that the market really hadn't seen the benefit of this project. From our perspective, we focused on the positives. It had a 13 to 15 foot clear, a steel and masonry construction, 2 loading docks, and obviously the location speaks for itself. So we set out to identify tenants that sort of valued those characteristics and wanted to take it somewhat further. We were fortunate enough, of course, to introduce the project to DPR.
I think for us, another primary factor is we came from a building that really felt like law firm. And we're a general contractor. We're a general contractor that's got great culture. And so for us, we wanted that at-grade entrance. We wanted our customers, our clients, our architect design partners, and our subcontractors to be able to pull up to the space and walk in and feel comfortable and not feel like it took 20 minutes to get from a parking garage into our office space. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the culture as an organization that helped drive us to the end result and the project goals a little bit. It really starts with an internal viewpoint of our business to change the world and respect the individual. So we wanted to be able to use something in this marketplace that many people thought couldn't be done or achieved, something that we had actually achieved in San Diego, San Francisco, and Phoenix before, which was to develop a net zero energy building. We further complicated that by it's a lease deal. In some of our other offices that we've been able to achieve those net zero requirements, they were purchases. We bought those buildings. So this was a little different twist for us to figure out a landlord that would be willing to work with us to achieve the goals and aspirations we set out. Furthermore, we took what used to be a pretty high rent at Fairview Park in the neighborhood of over $40 a square foot and took the savings in a space further out along the toll road and invested that back into the space in what we consider an investment in our people, that we could keep our people productive, happy, and to stay with us for a long term within our organization, and that was really important. We did set out with a large brainstorming, just like any commercial project would, on goals and what we wanted to establish as our kind of success factors for the project. And so we really boiled it down to 4 kind of critical ideas. And that was an office of the future, kind of that 21st century work environment that would invigorate people of all generations to be productive and enjoy coming to work every day. We wanted to do the right thing as it relates to sustainability, health, and wellness of our employees. We really did want to make data-driven decisions because we're a cultural company that enjoys people. We have wine bars in all of our offices. We like to celebrate things with our customers and our people. We also did want to make data-driven decisions around people and access. You know, we mapped out where all of our employees live and all the zip codes to find the right sweet spot of where that office location could be. But we also use data to make decisions around energy modeling and mechanical systems to be utilized. And last, we wanted to build a living laboratory so we could showcase it to people, we could utilize systems, building techniques that we could demonstrate to others that you all can do the same thing that we were able to achieve on this project. From a sustainability standpoint, it isn't just about net zero. In fact, these things came out of that idea of doing the right thing. We are chasing LEED Platinum certification. Our certification should be submitted within the next month or so. We intend and believe we will achieve a Platinum certification. We also will be certifying for WELL. There's only 30 plus or minus projects in the world right now that have gone through the full WELL certification. And we are excited to announce that we think we're going to get there to a silver or gold level. And then we also will go through a formal net zero certification process through the International Living Future Institute. It is a 12-month certification process that we started this past July, and so it will be into the summer of 2018 before we can say we've achieved that mark. But it's something we're excited to do, and we hope it will be our 4th DPR office around the country that achieves that certification. We also did things like utilizing cradle-to-cradle materials for all the interior finished products. So again, it really came back to doing the right thing related to the environment. So I'm going to click through a couple pictures so you get to see what the space looks like now that it's done. Some of you in the audience I've recognized and have toured the space, and so hopefully you can vouch for the incredible office space it is compared to the pictures Matt just showed you of what the space used to be. As Matt said, I'll use his words, the building had no value in the deal for Penzance originally. And so we think we've taken what was a really terrible space and made it world-class Class A office space. And so we've got a great picture there of our reception area, our open office space, and then also just utilizing how we work as individuals. We went through a really great process with Herman Miller and a Place Lab study to do a pre and post survey of our employees to try to understand how they work every day and how we could maximize the benefits of the space. That utilized various breakout rooms, conference rooms. We are an open office company. We have no offices across the entire portfolio for over 3,000 employees. We've been that way since 1992. And so we've got lots of lessons learned that we're able to utilize and drive to some success stories to make that open office concept work. And it has lots of flexibility, lots of breakout rooms, lots of varying conference room sizes. But we also, in this 21st century workplace, envision a place that employees don't want to sit at their work desk 8 hours a day. They want to be mobile. They want to feel like they're working in a cafe. They want to walk down the street, have lunch and sit with their employees or customers. But it feels like you're almost going to a different world when you walk into some of our living spaces within the environment. We also did provide a gym for our employees, even though we have really close proximity to the W&OD Trail and various other fitness centers in the area. We wanted our employees to feel comfortable like they could work out in the space. And it really is about creating, although we're a contractor, we have lots of meaningful conversations and serious conversations that are more boardroom setting. We wanted a place where people could have casual conversations as well. Here's a picture of the wine bar I talked about. It does have beer also. We're not just wine snobs. We utilize all types of beverages in the office location, but it's not just...
You like to drink and ride bikes? This is what it looks like as well?
Yeah. For us, the wine bar really is about a location for our employees to celebrate, to communicate to each other, to share. We had some of the folks from Davis Carter Scott's design team yesterday out for a tour in the afternoon, and we spent about 2 hours kind of hanging out and talking about sustainability and the future of design and what our world could look like. And so it's a great place for people to kind of mingle, and although it's circulation space, we treat it like program space. So here's a picture. This Herman Miller system, really that we call the guitar pick table. It's the idea that there's no head of the table. Everybody can see each other and the screen. We did utilize a bunch of bar height table conference room spaces to try to mix it up and change it up a little bit. It really provides an incredible collaboration space for people. And what we found is these spaces that have bar height tables actually get utilized more than 50% more than any of the other breakout or conference rooms in the space. So I wanted to show some images of the space so you got a comfort level for what it looks like. I've been telling people when we talk about the space, the power of and. It can be sustainable, it can be energy efficient, it can be beautiful architectural space that people enjoy working in. You don't have to make choices between those ideas. And I think that's really important because as we go into talk about the challenges of the space, you have to understand that there doesn't have to be sacrifice. You can achieve it all.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
So we sort of get into some of the bricks and sticks, rather, relative to the building. And in your pursuit of energy efficiency, we spent a lot of time talking about and really being educated by DPR on PV and solar. Initially, I believe your calculations stated that you needed about roughly half of the roof, which worked well for us as a landlord, because typically what we're providing is a pro rata share of rooftop usage. That allowed us to preserve the balance of the roof for any other tenants in the building. In this case, ultimately, the calculation determined that the requirement actually was for the entire roof. So I'll spare you the details, but ultimately we ended up with a alternative plan, a backup plan rather, where we could transfer half of the panels to carports that would be constructed above the exterior outdoor parking. We sort of then jumped into roof maintenance, et cetera. The building, it was an older asset. The useful life of the remaining roof was, let's just say, not on the same path as the PV panels. So we were fortunate to have a good group. We worked together to not only replace the roof, setting up our sort of simultaneous expiration of those materials, and at the same time a roof maintenance program for all of the penetrations, various penetrations for the skylights as well as the PV. DPR is another unique aspect of this tenant, which we don't typically see, is their desire to improve the building systems. From HVAC and plumbing and fire alarm, there was a significant amount of coordination there from our group, and again, education. Particularly given that the other floor had not yet been occupied, and the use was sort of unknown.
So I think on the roof, to talk a few specifics, it's one of the things that our initial energy calculations indicated we would use about 50% of the roof space. But then as you start to factor in the challenges of, okay, now we've got a bunch of skylights across that roof area that take up space. You look at shading coefficients from trees and the panels themselves. We've got a cooling tower on the roof. In this picture, you can actually see 2 domestic solar hot water systems as well that we're using for domestic hot water in the space. And so as you start to add those factors in, the roof area starts to get really condensed. And then further add to that, the local fire marshal review, where they came out and said from a safety standpoint, we really want 5 foot of a perimeter around the entire office roof area. So we had to pull our panels 5 feet from the edge of the roof. And then in addition to that, we want both a horizontal and a vertical walking path between the solar panel areas. And so what we thought where we had lots of space for PV, more than enough to get to our net zero goal, became a challenge literally of inches to figure out where those panels could get located. And then to lay on the fact of how do you sequence them and set them up and band them together so that in the future, if we needed to remove them, we could pull 50% off and put them in carports. I think another interesting story here is the back and forth and the relationship with Penzance that was not always easy, right? These are 2 firms trying to figure this out in a landlord-tenant lease deal of like, well, what happens if we get another 30-inch snowstorm, right? Who shovels the snow off the panels? And then if you're going to do that DPR, does that go to the roof area? And do we have to then shovel twice as much snow? Who deals with those things? How do you deal with if there's a roof leak, a massive roof leak, or a failure in the roofing membrane? Who's responsible for the cost of removing those solar panels temporarily and putting them back? All things that we had to think about, right? And as we engage with other people at Penzance, way past the initial deal stage, people are getting engaged. The asset manager, the people who manage the facility itself, start to answer questions that we hadn't worked out in the original lease deal, right? So it ended up doing an amendment to the lease to kind of work through some of these details, and that was challenging. Our solar panel system got installed last June. We moved in July of the year before, right? Actually, August of the year before. So it took us quite a while to work through all those details, to get it back submitted into the county for approval, and then it pulled a separate permit to get that space and the PV panels done in that time frame. I think the other component, Matt mentioned the HVAC systems. Unlike a traditional tenant where the core HVAC systems are there for you, in order to achieve our net zero certification, we had to really start over. We gutted that space, right? It was an unoccupied building for over 7 years with really outdated systems. We made the choice to make that investment in the building, right? It's an investment that after our 10-year lease, if we don't re-up and we're not in that building, we really spent some money to assist the asset itself. But for us, that was really important to get to that net zero target. And again, these are difficult conversations that you have to include the landlord in because ultimately they own it. They're the ones who are going to operate it and maintain it. And so they had to be comfortable with the systems we selected in order to get to net zero. The other component certainly was fire alarm systems because we're in a 2-story building. Although we're on the top floor with an at-grade entrance, right? This is, again, a building that was unoccupied. And so we had to work through fire alarm challenges on the lower floor in order for us to occupy the space. There's also a world from a well and LEED certification standpoint of cleaning guidelines and making sure that the landlord is going to provide the appropriate amount of cleaning services and the documentation required for us to achieve those credits. That was really important, and we had to work closely with the operations and facilities team to do that. We also worked with them to be acceptable to modifying both the entry of the building and an original loading dock area so it could be outdoor space for us. Again, these are critical decisions that A, cost money, and B, we needed to understand if our landlord was willing to play ball with us to make some of these significant changes to the building. But they've also stepped up and since move-in have redone all the landscaping with natural vegetation in the space. They've redone all the parking lots. We've got visitor spots. We've got carpool spots. They've really been a great landlord to work with to develop that relationship and kind of take it from the initial lease signing and move-in period to work with us in a collaborative way.
So through DPR's efficiency, sustainability, and hard work, as Matt mentioned, the value was kind of underwritten at a very low number or zero kind of going into this. So from the hard work, effort, and design from the tenant working with the landlord, they really have increased the asset value. And through that, it's really become an attraction to other tenants. If you look at some of the pictures that you've seen of the second floor space, they've gone in and gutted the first floor space, put in a roll-up door, a lot of glass into otherwise was a very dark, gloomy, I think the back half of the space has no windows in it at all and has really opened that the asset up on the first level as well to where I think you guys have started working on a 6,000 square foot yoga group that's going in downstairs. There's activity on the balance of the space, 12,000 square feet. So they kind of led the way on the second floor, and I think if you tour those people, those prospective tenants through the second floor, through DPR space, it really shows the potential of an otherwise dark and vacant building for 7, 8 years, what the potential is, and you're starting to see that momentum push down on the first floor now. With that, I think you're starting to see other landlords that have similar assets, not just along the toll road, Northern Virginia, DC metro area, that see the creativity that DPR has brought to it, that a lot of the architecture firms like the Davis Carter Scotts are able to take to these assets, and you're starting to see more and more landlords kind of open up and say, you know what, we need to put a little money into this asset. We can really remarket it, market it in a different way, different tenant base, and you're starting to see more success as far as that is concerned. As far as outside the box solutions, I think they've done a great job hitting that on as far as, hey, let's go ahead and litter the roof with as many solar panels as we can. Well, hey, the pro rata share is 50-50. If someone comes up, well, hey, we'll solve that problem. There's plenty of parking out there. We can do the parking canopies to help kind of solve that solution if that were to come along. Really, the amount, they call it a living lab, and I think that's what those outside-the-box solutions are really showed. When you go through the space, it's really impressive to see everything that they put into the space.
Yeah. So just kind of current outcomes and some information before we get into questions and answers. We know you've probably, hopefully, got some really good questions for our team. We took occupancy in August of 2016. It was about a 24-week construction process for us. So it was quick. Now, there was a lot of planning that went into it. We started the planning of this particular project in about October of 2015. We are targeting LEED Platinum certification under V4. We are, at a minimum, going to achieve Silver certification within well. The Healthy Buildings folks are helping us through the testing requirements in order to achieve the prerequisites in that system. And then the Net Zero certification, right? That's kind of the big one for us. One of my coworkers or managers really challenged us going into the project that if you can't financially make this project viable within a 10-year payback, then we're not going to do it. And there were numerous times along this path that we thought that opportunity was dead. The Christmas Eve before we started renovation or demolition of the space, I got a quote from a subcontractor for reinforcing the roof for those PV panels, and the quote was almost $900,000. Now, our total budget for the space, all in, was $6 million, about $300 a square foot for everything. IT, AV, design, permit, construction, base building modifications, all in, we're $6 million. And that $900,000 price tag almost killed us going for a Net Zero certification. But through hard work and perseverance, we worked with the structural engineer, we worked with the subcontractors, we worked with the design team, and got that $900,000 premium to $200,000 by asking the right questions, by working through and driving the details, right? The structural engineer had assumed a 20 pounds per square foot dead load of additional solar panels and systems. The reality is that it was less than 6. And so by driving those things, we changed the structural design and achieved significant savings to make it possible and viable. It also, for us, wasn't just about net zero lead, but I mentioned well and our people, right? And so we were really excited to be part of the Leesman Index Survey. Leesman is a UK firm that does workplace strategy engagement. We participated in a survey with them. They've done over 3,000 company surveys. Our final end score ended up in the top 4% of all of those companies that they've surveyed, right? It means that our people love the space. They enjoy working there. We moved from Falls Church to Reston, right? It challenged about 30% of our staff with about a 20 to 30 minute longer commute in each direction. We haven't lost a single employee after over 14 months of being in this space. Those are dollars that you can't put a number to, right? It's so important for us to make sure that we didn't just create an environmental story, but we also created a story about people and health and well-being. So from an energy side, you know, I think it is good to understand comparison. Many of you have probably heard of the Brock Environmental Education Center that has achieved a Living Building Challenge Award. And that building, from an EUI, energy use intensity standpoint, was at a 14, right? So our office space was designed and currently operating at about a 28. So not quite as successful from an energy reduction standpoint as an environmental education center. But as an office space, 28 is pretty amazing. It's less than half than a traditional LEED Silver, LEED Gold certified office space in the DC market. And we had to, that was really important for us to get there and make it a viable solution. Anybody could go out and design a building to be net zero and spend millions of dollars to put solar panels on the roof. It takes a lot of hard work and discipline by all the team members that were involved to drive energy out of the building and then design your solar systems to meet that demand. So with that, I've got one more thing to show you, and then we'll open it up for some questions and answers. In the tote bags you received this morning, you got this little cardboard thing. And I saw a few folks this morning going, what the heck? What am I doing with this? I don't understand. And so if you want to take a virtual tour of the space, a fully modeled version, all you got to do is take and pop out this little guy out of the holder. On the top of that cardboard, you'll see a website address. If you go there with your phone, it will take you to what looks like you're standing outside of our building. And there's a little button that says Enter Virtual Reality or Enter VR. And if you click that and then open this guy up, fold the tabs out, it becomes a $4 really expensive virtual world tour glass. You slide your phone in when you're at the website, and now you have a 3D viewer. You can use these to adjust your eyes. And so within that tour, you can literally hop around about 12 different places within the full model. There's some audio clips embedded that talk about the sustainable strategies in the building as well. And so it's a great way that if you can't physically come visit us in Reston, to take that virtual tour. And I think that's the kind of technology that people can utilize to see what their spaces can become as we move forward. So lots of great opportunities for technologies we work through. If anybody needs help with that, come find me throughout the rest of the day. I'm happy to help. With that, we can start with some questions and answers.
And I had the opportunity to tour the space yesterday, and I can tell you it's exceptional. Take the time, do the VR tour, if you can't get out there, you really see a group that's walking the walk when it comes to sustainability. It's great to see. So we have some time for questions. Let me start here since I'm right here.
Thank you. So my question is, what was the landlord's contribution towards your construction cost to offset the $300 a square foot? And the second question is, what technology are you using to monitor to ensure that you're going to be in compliance down the road?
Yeah, both great questions. So we had a $60 square foot TI allowance for the space. And then Penzient's also kicked in some money for the entry upgrades and vestibule changes. From a technology standpoint, if you go out and Google DPR Reston Lucid dashboard, we've got a full integrated OS dashboard system that publishes all of our information. We've sub-metered lighting, mechanical, plug load, all of those elements, water, all have meters on them, and you can see how they all track. And that dashboard also links to many of our other offices that utilize the same dashboard. We are currently integrating our SunPower solar system into that information. So the current dashboard shows you how much we're consuming, but the plug-in for our solar system isn't 100% complete yet. it will be. But if you're interested in those kinds of things, I'm happy to share our SunPower system with you as well, because you can log in and see how much energy we're producing right this very minute and how much over a day, week, or month time frame. So for us, we have a saying at DPR that if you're not keeping score, it's just practice. And so it is that idea of we need to be walking the walk, and we've got to validate what we did, because otherwise we're wasting our time and energy. And we can't influence the marketplace if we can't showcase to people how they can get there and how it's currently functioning. Great questions.
So I'm assuming that your certifications are all for your space and not for the building as a whole, and I'm curious in hearing a little more about how you're going to work with other prospective tenants on the balance of the building. You know, what happens if you get somebody who says, I love what DPR did, I want to do the same thing? You know, what are the improvements that DPR paid for that are going to benefit the other tenants or not? You know, a little bit more about the sort of, you've only got half the building, what's up with the other half?
Yeah. Good question. Maybe, Matt, you can chime in a little bit. But I think for us, we did look at it like our space, right? So we assisted the landlord in basically demolishing or renovating the lower level to be a white box to prepare it for other tenants. But I think Matt talked about this notion that if another tenant wants to come in and wants to do net zero, we're gonna help them through that system. We've got some additional load capacity in our head-end mechanical systems, but we really did think through the design concept of taking panels and putting them in carports, and even modeled where would those carports not be shaded, how do we get enough energy, how do we get the electrical feed into the electrical room tied with the rest of the solar panels, right? Those are the ways we work together to facilitate that kind of opportunity downstairs. The reality, my gut, is that we're going to get very few tenants who come in and say, we want to be net zero and invest the kind of money DPR did in the space. Now, my hope would be that they look at the example we set out and do the right thing with the environment. And whether they LEED certify or not, we want to help them with material choices, construction techniques to make it as environmentally responsible as possible. I don't know if you've got anything to add from tenants and other people looking at it, or even fielding from your standpoint.
Yeah, I would just add that we had a general understanding of net zero, but became educated through the process, and we're fully supportive of the approach. And we're fortunate that DPR sort of designed in the excess capacity in the event that an additional tenant was interested in a similar design.
Well, I think prospective tenants that have looked at the balance of the space downstairs have toured DPR space, and there's interest to take it to a certain extent or a certain level, but I don't think to the, we'll call it the max, or to the level that you guys have taken it to. But I think you guys have also been very well at coaching them on how they can get to certain levels and certain points. Yeah. So I think that's what you're seeing, the interest factor downstairs.
Could they use negative though? Like, if somebody used the space wrong, could influence your certificate?
Yeah, great question. So one of the other benefits of the building, and one of the things we had to work with with Dominion Virginia Power and the landlord, was to create a separate meter. So we actually have two electrical feeds coming into the building, because we're producing power and putting it on the grid. And the idea of net zero is we produce more power than we consume in a given year. So there's ups and downs there from month to month. And so having that separate meter just for our space was really important. So we had to work with Dominion Virginia Power and the landlord to make sure we could do that. So there wouldn't be a negative impact. Now, I can tell you, this was not easy, right? It took a team of people that were willing to call bullshit on each other, that were willing to challenge each other. And even this past January, after move-in, we were analyzing our current energy data and realized that our mechanical system was working about 30% harder than we expected it to, which, if continued that way, would have killed our ability to get to net zero. And so we had a big powwow. We had the engineers, we had the architects, we had everybody in the room to try to figure out what was going on. And it actually, the answer was really simple. So the downstairs space that we had gutted, which was unoccupied at the time, really was acting as a giant refrigerator, because it wasn't being tempered to the level that you normally would assume it to be tempered. And when we ran all energy model calculations, we don't assume that we've got a concrete slab that's less than 50 degrees that's radiating cold air through the space. And we were like, so we started to think through things. So we had the engineer model it with basically a radiant slab that was below temperature, and sure enough, That's what was driving our systems. So we worked with Penzance to make sure the systems down there were functioning and keeping that space tempered, and boom, we came back in line with our energy predictions. And so it's an amazing world because energy modeling is not perfect. And those are the kind of lessons learned. It's like, wow, okay, we gotta think about that next time. Our other offices that we've done net zero have all been at grade with a slab on grade. They've never had to deal with this other condition of space below you.
So, what you just said, sorry, I don't want to just jump into it.
We still have plenty of time for questions, so we'll get to many of you. No worries.
So that was a very interesting presentation, thank you. I'm Smita Thomas, I have a consulting practice, Energy Shrink, very interested in the technical aspects of this. From what you just said, it sounded like to get your bills down by 30%, you were conditioning an unoccupied space. Isn't, on balance, that more wasteful than spending 30% more on conditioning the upstairs?
Yeah, so I'll try to answer that question. I think I understood the question. So the downstairs space was unoccupied and not being conditioned because it's below us and half of it's tucked in at grade. And so it's just like going in your attic at home. If it's in the middle of the winter, it's cold. If it's the middle of summer, it's really hot. And so it was just something we hadn't thought about as tenant. But the landlord controls that space. It's a completely different mechanical system. It does not fall under our certification zone. And so that was a dramatic impact on us. But we didn't discover it until we ran the energy model calcs and realized, wow, we're spending way more time mechanically. So I think I answered that question.
What was the net though? The building as a whole.
Yes, it means that
Yeah.
you spend more energy.
Yeah.
You didn't spend it, but
Somebody else is spending more energy to keep that space downstairs tempered. But it's no different than if you had a fully unoccupied building. They're going to need to spend energy to heat and cool that space. If it was occupied, it wouldn't become an issue at all, right? It's just because it was an unoccupied floor.
One real quick, I think either Matt or Fielding, your mic is turned off. If you could just verify that you're switched on there. Deborah, next question.
Deborah Jacobson, I'm with the Sierra Club. You've talked about how the asset value of this property increased. And I'm working with the Virginia Energy Efficiency Council on a commercial PACE webinar, or seminar, excuse me, for November 29th for Fairfax County to encourage the county to move to do commercial PACE financing. They need to do an ordinance. And I guess I would be interested, given your own experience, the county is concerned about the value of some of these older properties, whether this type of approach being facilitated by financing might help the county in their economic development.
Sure. That's probably a question for you two more than me. Yeah.
You were playing with your microphone, weren't you? Go for it. I don't think I can get it to work. And I'm sorry. So you want her to repeat the question so you can hear a little more of what she was saying? Would you mind repeating a small bit of that?
Basically, if there was a financing approach such as commercial property assessed clean energy, might that facilitate the increase in value that you saw in this property by taking an old property that wasn't very attractive, and you had financing to help other people do this much more readily? How would that help with economic development of these older properties?
I think it would definitely help owners as well as tenants help nudge the process along from taking a dark space that had not been occupied. And I think there are a lot of those opportunities that are out there. I think that's an opportunity that you've talked about as well as, hey, we did this in, I don't want to say lemon, a lemon into a lemonade, but what other opportunities are out there in the market. I do think that county funding could help nudge along from a landlord standpoint. I think you'd probably be a little more open to having that little assistance, and I think tenants would be as well.
Yeah, I would just simply add, in terms of building value, most investors these days are looking for stabilized assets for the most part, given the vacancy that we're seeing that's sort of unprecedented in this market. And sort of the other piece of that is their capital investment. So, and oftentimes when they're looking for sort of a core plus or core type investment, the expectation is that the building is fully improved and you've got credit tenancy in place that's performing. So I would sort of look at it from that perspective. The new investor coming into that project is sort of buying something that's fully improved. They are getting the credit tenancy, and there isn't a near-term need for capital.
Yeah, I would add some specific to the numbers for us that may help you process the information. So if we look at a true payback with about a 5% energy escalator over the 10-year lease, and the amount of energy we're saving on a year-to-year basis, it's about a 24-year payback. And you may ask yourselves, well, why would DPR make that investment for a 24-year payback in a 10-year lease? And it's like, well, because that's how it's traditionally done. Now, the SREC market will assist in that. It's actually not something we're currently utilizing, but we are looking into it. But in Virginia, that SREC market is not great, right? It's one of the things, I think, a differentiator between DC and why we're seeing so much solar activity in DC right now is the solar rec market in the DC area is $500 a megawatt hour, and in Virginia, it's $15. And so there are opportunities for the county and or Virginia to aid in that process, to assist people to pay for some of these strategies that really bring in resiliency to the marketplace and allow us to be a little more flexible in times of challenges. But I'd say the other argument is we looked at it not just like on a true cost payback of energy, but Fielding mentioned the $2 a square foot, that almost every one of you, if you go back and look at your lease of what you're paying your landlord, you're paying somewhere between $2 and $3 a square foot for energy and water consumption, right? We took that risk on ourselves. And if you just look at the $2 a square foot, that would also get escalated, and I can't remember what the term was, but if you looked at that savings over the 10-year period, we actually have an exact 10-year payback on the investment in getting to net zero, not a 24-year payback, because we're saving that $2 a square foot on consumption charges. So we ran the numbers both ways, and that was part of our discussion process or data-driven decisions to make the decisions about systems and selections of this building.
Next question.
Hi. Since I work for USGBC, I'm going to ask something of a potentially dangerous question. We hear a lot that LEED and now WELL is expensive, and it's a deterrent for some folks that are building. My question, Chris, is was there a premium to building a LEED, Platinum, and WELL project here, or I heard a budget number of $6 million. Were you able to reach your goals by setting a budget and sticking to that budget and still making certification?
Yeah, boy, that is a loaded question, Mark. So I'll be pretty, so I'm by trade, I'm a pre-construction guy. I'm a numbers guy. And I get this question a lot, is like, well, what is the premium? And I think it comes down to a lot of factors. One is building type. One is program type. 3 is location, right? You can give me a LEED Gold building that's 20,000 square feet in Culpeper, and that cost premium is different than that exact same 20,000 square foot building in Fairfax County, right? Because the number of points and credits that you can achieve is different based on location, and people forget that. Location is a huge factor for lots of great reasons within the LEED rating system, right? So I don't want to caveat my answer a little bit, but those factors are really huge in what the premium is. The other is having team members that are knowledgeable and understand the system. Are there costs for those certifications? Yes, right? Are they significant in a $6 million budget? I don't think so. I think the team members doing the right thing and analyzing information to make the right environmental decision, that's really important. And that's where we started, right? The other benefit we have in the DC market and the Virginia market is our codes are already getting us to almost base level certification. The premiums you're paying really are for people's time to run the proper energy models, to run the certification paperwork and getting those submitted. But I used the term earlier that if you're not keeping score, it's just practice. If you're not going through an actual certification, people cut corners. We are in a busy marketplace where people are running around at breakneck speed. And so what happens in those scenarios is people cut corners. And you end up with a product or a project that does not meet its original intended target without those certifications. So on day one, we budgeted certification costs for all of the rating systems, even though we weren't sure we were going to be able to achieve some of them. We built it into the budget. And so as we went, it didn't become a, hey, we just got to VE this to save some money. It was already built in. So I could talk for 2 hours about that topic, but I think it's really, really important for people to understand what is the comparison, what is the baseline. And you can take the same building in Washington, D.C. or Reston, Virginia, and put it in Dallas, Texas, and it's two completely different analysis and paybacks.
Satisfied? Okay.
It's great to see everyone committed to bringing this to a successful conclusion and sharing it with us. My question as an architect is, just to make sure I understand, the building itself is not LEED certified platinum. It's just the space that you occupy that's LEED certified. Given the age of the building, you didn't have to deal with any hazardous materials or abatement, is that correct?
That's correct. The building was clean from an abatement standpoint.
All right. In terms of the energy modeling for the space that you occupy, not the building itself, did you have to do anything with the exterior building envelope in terms of air and thermal barrier, continuous insulation, given the existing wall assembly you inherited?
Yeah, great question. So I can't remember if I added it, and we've got some supporting slides here because I thought, yep, there it is. I thought this question might come up. Insulation, look at that, perfect. So we ran energy modeling across 4 different mechanical systems in the space. And we didn't note all of the partners we worked with, but Smith Group JJR was our architect. Southland Mechanical was the design build mechanical engineer. MC Dean was the design assist electrical engineer. And then we hired sustainable building partners to be our kind of sanity check in the room to basically, I said this earlier, but call bullshit, excuse the language, with everybody in the room to make sure we were making smart decisions. And our first budget actually included $130,000 of re-insulating the existing roof and the perimeter wall from an R and U value standpoint to achieve net zero. Everyone in the room, about 20 people, insisted we were going to have to do this. And then I, as an estimator, started looking at the line items within the estimate going, wow, 130 grand for insulation. Like, that's a lot. I'm only spending $400,000 on my PV system, but I'm going to insulate this building for 130 grand. And so the first check was, hey, Smith Group, go find out, do we need to insulate from a building, code standpoint with this renovation? And they came back and said no. And so then I forced our team to go energy model with and without insulation, both in the roof and the wall and combination thereof. And you can kind of see the numbers at the bottom here, right, of the different systems with and with insulation, without insulation. And depending on the systems, we were talking about anywhere from a $400 a year savings to a $1,300 or $1,400 a year savings. Anybody do the math of 130 grand divided by $1,400? The payback is never, right? It doesn't make sense, not in my lifetime in this business. And so I said, well, what are we doing? Why are we spending 130 grand to insulate this building? I can go put up 5 more solar panels if I need to generate that additional energy, right? But then, again, this comes back to tough people asking tough questions. Sustainable Building Partners came back and said, well, what about on peak days? What about in the summer, in August, when it's 98 degrees with 80% humidity and you can't get to 75 degrees inside the space? And we said, fine. For the 2 or 3 days a year that's going to happen, we're okay with that, right? And so those were the kinds of questions and dialogue we had around things like insulation. But this was 30 days after every single person in the room said we were going to have to do it. And that's where I think we have to challenge ourselves as design team members, as construction members, is to go above and beyond the traditional norm and what we've done before to do something different and unique. And at times, take some risks. So great question.
Thank you. All right, let me take a question over here. Or not. Okay. Oh.
Hi, so now that you're in your building, are there any things that you did that you wished you didn't, or you found it was just for a certification or a point?
Could you repeat that question? I didn't.
So now that you're in your building and you occupy the space, are you finding that there are any items that you did that was just for a certification or for a point that you kind of thinking, why did we do that?
Yeah, good question. So I'll repeat. So I think, if I heard this right, now that we're in the space, the certification levels that we're chasing, is there anything we just spent money to achieve the points? Is that yeah. So I think it probably should go back and relook at the scorecards, both for LEED and WELL. I think the answer is no. We really started with this goal of do the right thing from an environmental and well-being standpoint. And so we made it purposefully not to chase points or credits. All right, now some of those lofty goals of net zero automatically get you all of the energy credits. And so it's easy to get to high levels of certification with that level of commitment, right? There are things that we did that haven't been well utilized yet, but we're working towards it. We provided bikes and helmets for people to get to and from the W&OD trail and other parts around our office community. They're used a little bit, right? But the problem is people don't know where to go, because most people are driving to the space right now. Although we're within walking distance to the Wheeling Metro, we haven't quite utilized that yet. But it's like, okay, well now we've learned, we got to provide. And so actually one of the interns we had this summer worked on a map to show people, hey, within 4 minutes you could get to these food trucks on the bike. Within 6 minutes you can get to this Starbucks on the bike. And so we're learning about how to make better use of the things we put in the space.
And I saw a question over here.
Hi, I'm Patrick Keenan. I work with BF Saul Company Hospitality Group, and we own and manage hotels. I recently did a solar project researching that, and I was curious what sort of training or restrictions you may have with your employees in the building, because, you know, for instance, in our office, I would imagine that a small space heater under a desk in the wintertime is probably frowned upon when you're reaching for net zero.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. The thing about our project, I think, which is really unique, our project team members were incredible. And although it was a short time frame, right, 24 weeks of construction and about 6 to 8 months of planning, we had lots of lessons learned to build on from our other, not only our own DPR offices, but projects we build for lots of people around the area. And I think for us, what we discovered was we've got to set the example for people to understand why we're making the decisions we're making. So in our old office in Falls Church, if you went to one side of the office, literally we had people in coats and hats and blankets that were freezing cold, right? When you walked to the other side of the office, it was like 85 degrees and people were sweating and wearing t-shirts going, this is horrible. And if you walked from one area to the other, you didn't know what to do. Like, do I take a bag of gloves and coats with me? I mean, it was really that bad. And so what we said, instead of letting net zero drive our decision around thermal comfort, what we said is we're going to provide a consistent level of comfort throughout the entire office space, period. We're not going to expand, other than on those peak days, we're not going to expand the thermal comfort range, which is how our Phoenix office, San Francisco office, and San Diego office got to some of their low EUIs that were actually under 15. We kept ours at 28 because we agreed to provide a consistent level of thermal comfort for people. You can't always make everyone happy, but we tried to make the most people we could happy in that space. And that was really critical. If we expanded that thermal comfort range, we could have used way less solar. We could have gotten a payback way faster, but we had to think through those things as we thought about the design concept. So great question.
Okay, we have time for one more.
Hi, I'm Marty Silver. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I'm looking at your data-driven decisions. So I assume from the pictures I saw you went with a DOAS VAV system. Was that driven more because of the first cost of the VRF system, or for maybe getting a better indoor environmental quality, or maybe for both?
Great question. I'm trying to find, here it is. So as we went through the process, we factored in acoustics, operations cost, maintenance cost, even though those were borne by the landlord. First cost, overall energy efficiency, flexibility, because we do believe over the 10-year period of time we'll end up renovating or shifting things around, and opportunity for us in a way that we could change systems. So we didn't get a chance to go into it, but we're using a DOAS system with boxes, fan power terminal units throughout with reheat coils. But we also utilized some new technologies in 3 of our rooms where we used a radiant sail. That radiant sail in those 3 rooms really only heats and cools when that space is occupied. And that was something we investigated across the entire space because they're really, really quiet, extremely energy efficient, but it came with a 40% price premium. And so we said, we're not ready to go there for the whole system, but let's put a couple in from that living laboratory standpoint. Ultimately for us, the DOAS unit, the fan power terminal units provided the most flexibility at the cheapest cost, but VRF was really close, like really close in the analysis. And I shared last night with the design team that we got to a point where all the team members thought we should utilize a different system. And I played owner, I took the contractor hat off, and I said to all of them in a meeting, if within a week you can't all get to concurrence about what mechanical system we want, you're all fired and we're gonna start over. And we got a report from Smith Group, Southland, Sustainable Building Partners, that all alignment on the mechanical system we installed.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. We have learned a lot today. Thank you, Matt, Chris, and Fielding.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Good job, thank you.
Yeah.
So the morning sessions have concluded. Next up is lunch, and I want to thank OCI Consulting Engineers for sponsoring our lunch today. If you can see any OCI folks out there, pat them on the back and thank them for your meal. They are MEP engineers, and they embrace sustainability at the highest level. They also do commissioning and lighting design, technology design, all of that great stuff. So thank you to OCI. We will break from 12 to 1 for lunch, and we'll start promptly at 1 o'clock for the afternoon sessions here in this room. I encourage all of you to take Dr. Elmore's advice and talk to each other during lunch about what are those little things that you're doing to make your life a little bit greener, make your home a little bit greener. And maybe we'll learn from each other today as well. So thank you, and we'll see you at 1.